Hello YouTube and welcome to Sci-Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. So, before we get started today, I wanted to talk about the channel for a quick sec. I know, no one likes anyone talking about their channel, but don't worry, I'll only take a second. You may have noticed I've started a few video series and then stopped them, like translating Baldur's Gate 3 characters into Pathfinder 2e or making pre-generated characters for the community. Here's the deal. I'm still a newish YouTube channel, and I'm still figuring out what works and what doesn't. I don't have an analyst or even an editor. It's literally just me in my apartment room recording, video editing, and figuring out things as I go. Now, I hope to turn this video into a new series where I take popular media and show how to turn it into a D&D or Pathfinder 2e game. But it may not work out. So, if the idea appeals to you, make sure to like, comment, and maybe send it to some friends who might like it as well. If it does well, I will continue the series. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's get into the episode proper. So, as of the making of this video, there is a new anime on Netflix, and I think it would make a great inspiration for a campaign for either Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder. The anime is called Delicious in Dungeon, though the Japanese title is Donjon Meshi, which translates to Dungeon Meal. So the following are technically spoilers, but it's all explained in the first 10 minutes of the first episode, so not really. In the world of Delicious in Dungeon, the anime explains that one day a dungeon appeared underneath a town. The dungeon used to be a vast, prosperous kingdom until one day it just disappeared. Supposedly, whoever defeats the spellcaster, called the Mad Mage, at the bottom of the dungeon gets control of it and can turn it into a vast, prosperous kingdom again. Naturally, the dungeon attracts adventurers and everyone's off to the races. What I really like about this anime is that there's very little winking to the camera. You see, there are a lot of medieval fantasy RPG style anime such as Konosuba or Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Yes, that's the name of a real anime. Those anime tend to have a lot of winking at the camera and jokes about RPG mechanics, even having RPG mechanics being part of their world. Delicious in Dungeon is different. Everything is handled in character. There are no jokes directly referring to RPG mechanics. All of the RPG jokes are more subtle. For example, in one episode, a dwarf and a human brace for an attack, but the human gets easily knocked over. This could possibly be a reference to earlier versions of Dungeons & Dragons where dwarves could resist being knocked back or prone. That's even a trait you can still get in Pathfinder 2e as an ancestry option. Probably the biggest RPG trope they lean into in this anime is that death is a status effect. People die all the time in the dungeon, and it is treated as a mild inconvenience because resurrection magic is so commonplace. In fact, that's the impetus for the start of the show. Again, spoilers for the first episode, but the show starts with a party nearly wiping against a dragon. One spellcaster, as she is being eaten, teleports the rest of the party back to the surface, but only with the gear on their backs, not the money they left back at camp. Now, the eaten spellcaster, who is the sister of the fighter in the group, is certainly dead. But the party figures that if they can get back and kill the dragon within a month, they can cut the skeleton out and revive her. This is because dragons, it is explained, have slow metabolisms. The problem is they have no money, so they can't buy food and supplies for their next dungeon dive. So they decide to survive off of the monsters in the dungeon. When they start off, they're pretty bad at it, but they soon meet a dwarf named Senshi who is an expert at cooking dungeon monsters, and they party up. And that's the show. It's essentially one mega dungeon with a survival element and a timer to save the human fighter's sister. There's surprisingly a lot of good character development in the show as all of the characters bounce off of each other. If you want to adapt this show into a campaign and you want more story, in recent episodes, again at the time of this video's making, there is the beginnings of a political intrigue plot as the elves are demanding to take possession of the village and the land that surrounds the dungeon. There's also the mystery of all the powerful magic spells that the Mad Mage has put on the dungeon. So, how do we turn this into a campaign? Well, for starters, the equipment we see in the show suggests that most D&D and Pathfinder armor and weaponry should be fine. We see standard swords and armor, crossbows, so all of that stuff. No firearms in the show yet, but those would probably not be too out of place. As of yet, there doesn't seem to be any magic swords and armor. In D&D, magic weapons and armor aren't strictly necessary, but that might be a problem for Pathfinder players because Pathfinder math requires magic weapons. That's not a big problem though, as Pathfinder users can just go with the optional automatic bonus progression rule to compensate. Or you could just throw magic items in if you're willing to tweak the setting a bit. For races, or ancestries, Delicious in Dungeon has a lot of the staples, though they are sometimes called something else. There are the standard elves, dwarves, and these guys who are called gnomes. There are also orcs, though they aren't treated very well by other races and considered monsters. Humans exist, though they are called tall men, and halflings who are called half-foots. Lastly, in one episode we see this husky person who's called a kobold. Despite the name Kobold, I would probably give them the stats of a gnoll in Pathfinder 2e, which are being rebranded as Kolo. In D&D, the closest match I can find are the Vulpin from the Humblewood campaign setting. And lastly, goblins are mentioned but not shown, at least not so far, so maybe you could include them too. As for classes, all of the non-magical classes seem to be fine. Fighters, rogues, and barbarians seem to be represented well enough. The show doesn't seem to differentiate between different types of spellcasters, though they do say that different spellcasters have different specialities. Fallen, the girl that was eaten by a dragon, seems to have been some sort of cleric according to the stories we hear about her. She's good against undead, has damage-resistant spells, and can heal. Marcel, the elf spellcaster in the main party, seems to be more of a druid character. She has some healing magic, but has mostly elemental spells like causing explosions and water walking. She doesn't seem to be able to wild shape like a D&D druid, but otherwise, that seems to be about right. In Pathfinder 2, I might make her a primal witch or primal sorcerer. It's not a perfect fit, but it's close enough. As for custom rules for the campaign, if you want to recreate the survival aspect, I might suggest banning spells that create food, such as D&D's Goodberry or the Pathfinder equivalent Cornucopia. You might want to create a homebrew subsystem for keeping track of party rations, as a large part of the show is getting proper nutrition, such as making sure you have protein, fat, and proper vegetation. If you really want to go wild, you could also have your players keep track of other things like cooking fuel. That may seem oppressive, but it leads the party in the show to do some really cool stuff that I would totally believe would happen in a role-playing game. For example, in one episode, the party finds a non-magical flame trap. Reasoning that a flame trap would need fuel, they disarm the trap and find the fuel reserve, which turns out to be cooking-grade oil. They take most of the oil but leave some, then turn the trap back on and use the flame to cook with, which is ingenious and 100% something I'd believe an RPG party would do. It also leads to a great character moment between the dwarf, Senshi, and the halfling or half-foot rogue, Chilchuck. So, if you want to start a new D&D or Pathfinder game and are stuck for ideas, try taking some cues from Delicious in Dungeon. I think it would make a great campaign for groups that like combat, dungeon dives, and inventory management. I know that doesn't sound like fun to many of you, but you know there are parties out there that are into that sort of stuff. And hey, you could always do what the show does and start off with some simple combats and survival, let player personalities bounce off each other, and then maybe start working in some political plots. Anyway, that's all for today. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to this fun new show, as well as giving everyone an option for a new, easy, ready-made campaign. And hey, if you like this video and want to see more campaign ideas, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching, and happy gaming.